Hey fellow Nevillers, here we are back again with another personal share. Neville has sent me today a lecture from 1966 called Occupant or Inmate. I'm thinking we can guess what this means. Neville's actually describing in this lecture whether we're an inmate of what we call a state or an occupant of a state. And as we know, a state in Neville land is a state of consciousness, because consciousness is the only reality. We may forget that from time to time. I sure know that I do. Anyway, on with the lecture, my lovelies. Neville gives a great description at the beginning here and clears up something I'm a little confused with. Maybe I shouldn't be, but whatever, I am. And what he does is explain who Christ, God and man are, interchangeable, vice versa, that kind of thing. Let me share what he says, because you can understand it a lot better when Neville says it. So, of course, he opens the lecture with the lecture title. Tonight's subject is occupant or inmate. An occupant establishes title to property by dwelling in it. Yes, Neville, and is free to come and go as he chooses. An inmate is confined, whether it be a prison or asylum. The inmate is restrained by law, yet he is just as free as the occupant, but he doesn't know it. And that's absolutely true. If you've read through Neville's works, you'll understand what he's trying to tell us there. Now to the description of Christ, God, man. Now, Christ is what God means by man. And if you know who Christ is, then you will know that Christ is what... Then we have a Bible quote. Now, Christ is what God means by man, and if you know who Christ is, then you will know that Christ is what man means by God. And then we have a quote. Christ in you is the hope of glory. Therefore, let us make man in our image as Christ is the image of the invisible God. So Christ, your own wonderful human imagination, is what God means by man. And when man speaks of God, he is speaking of his own wonderful human imagination, tying them together by saying God is man and man is God. They are truly one, for God is infinite man, and man, confined to his senses, is finite God. Tonight I am going to try and show you the difference between the two and how they are both free but do not know it. Thank you, Neville. In the beginning, the book of John, Jesus is asked, "Where do you live?" And he answers, "Come and see." Now, if I invite you to follow me as I move towards my dwelling place, you would have to move, so there would be motion. We are always dwelling in and thinking from a state of consciousness. Do you know where you dwell? It is the place, the state, to which you consciously return. That is your dwelling place. A lady calls me time and time again, telling me how the people in her office do not like her. This is a funny story. You know how Neville is with his sense of humour. She moves to another job only to call again to tell how the people in this office have turned against her. Finding another job, the same story is repeated. When I ask how she knows they don't like her, she tells me how they get in a corner and whisper about her. Take a little break here. It's not actually funny, really, when you think about it. If someone is living in that space in their consciousness, they're always in fear. And that's not a fabulous place to be. So Neville continues. She is so convinced that this is true that she goes from job to job to job, to finding only those who dislike her, and although I tell her that the world is all imagination, she cannot believe it. But I tell you, the world without, which appears so very real, is a world of imagination. Imagine people are against you, that they are constantly talking about you, and you will go from job to job and watch the same experiences repeat themselves. For people are only personifying your thoughts. So where are you dwelling? Tonight I want to show you how to move, how to occupy a state and not be its inmate. Thank you, Neville. Every state, regardless of what it is waiting for occupancy. Neville tells us this all the time. Creation is finished. There's even a chapter in his Power of Awareness book, Creation is Finished. I ought to share that here. It's an important one. Now back to the lecture. The great tragedy of the world is perpetual construction, deferred occupancy. Another bunch of famous words that Neville shares. We can elaborate on this. Now let me continue. Construct your dream state in your mind's eye. And regardless of what the world may tell you, say to yourself, it can be. You may not have the educational background, be in the proper social circle, have the finances needed to fulfill your desire, but if you move in and occupy the state in your imagination, thinking from its fulfillment, the world will personify your thoughts and objectify the state you have occupied. I have to break here, my lovelies, and just tell you a little personal share here. I'm manifesting a house, or dream house, whatever house we call it, for myself. And my coach is telling me to occupy it, imaginally occupy it, make it your dwelling place. So I'm jumping for joy at Neville describing this part. I.e., but you must move in and occupy the state in your imagination, in my imagination. When you go from not a lot to, oh my God, look at this big house I've got. It takes a little bit of imaginal occupancy. That's the end of my blah blah. Now, Neville shares the 10th of Matthew. He shares it like this. Now listen to the words from the 10th of Matthew. Do not think that I came to bring peace upon the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. For a man's enemies are those of his own household. I used to struggle over trying to understand this one too. So thank you, Neville, one more time. These words are everlastingly true. You have no enemy other than that of your own household. Your father, mother, daughter, daughter-in-law or mother-in-law are not your household. They are your intimates. Your household is your imagination, where all your enemies live. Now we know. Thank you, Neville. Personified as your fellow workers, neighbours, those you meet during the day, the thieves who steal your purse. Their life is in you. Your thoughts are your enemies, for the world is your thoughts pushed out. This is another fascinating concept from Neville about everyone is yourself pushed out. You may hear this referenced as EIYPO, but personally, this may be an easier way to think about it. I think it's personally an easier way. Everyone is your thoughts pushed out. Let me break the lecture there, fellow Nevillers, because Neville shares some letters next. I think I might call these awakening letters because they're about us dreaming, or his audience dreaming, and he shares the lectures with everybody. when they're there, and I love sharing them here with you guys. I'm just fascinated by every piece of Neville I can get my eyes, brains and hands on. So back to the lecture. What he's trying to tell us in here is we think we're being persecuted from the outside, but it's not. Like he says, that enemies of our own household, he means here, in our imagination, in our state of consciousness. I went a long time thinking it's that person, it's that person, it's them. It could be your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, anybody. But it's nobody out there. It's everybody in here. Just like Neville says. So this lecture, fellow Nevillers, is part 1. I will split it up into 2 or 3, and then we'll go into each part that Neville shares in his lecture, and I'll decipher it. I was going to say I'll try and decipher it, but I'm being more determined. I'm going to decipher it. If I can't do it myself, I have access to coaches and people with a bigger brain than I, larger consciousness maybe, and I'll get the answers from them. So thank you for your time and attention. Please leave a comment and let me know which ones are your favourites, which parts resonate with you, or if there's anything you'd like explaining, because I love Neville, if in case you hadn't guessed. So thank you, fellow Nevillers. Thumbs up because YouTube loves it. So do I, and a big fat kiss. And thank you for your time and attention. Fabulous weekend, Nevillers. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.